Story 1. The door that should have stayed locked. Christmas Eve was supposed to be a warm, festive evening, but what transpired left a scar on all of us. We lived in a duplex back then, a modest home shared with a neighbor couple we barely ever saw. Their side was always silent, unremarkable, almost as if it didn't exist. The only strange thing about the house was the door connecting our two sides, a relic of a bygone time. It had a peculiar lock that required both sides to be unlocked to open, and since they moved in, it had remained firmly shut. Or so we thought. That night, as we enjoyed turkey and stuffing with my grandparents and uncles, a soft but persistent sound interrupted the clinking of cutlery. The doorknob to that door rattled. Slowly, deliberately. It wasn't accidental. It was as though someone on the other side was testing it. My dad stood, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. With one hand gripping the doorknob and the other steadying the lock, he asked, "Can I help you?" Silence. Undeterred, he unlocked our side and pulled the door open. Darkness swallowed their side of the duplex, thick and unbroken. Even the ambient light from our living room seemed hesitant to cross the threshold. "Hello," he called into the void. No response. We checked the driveway. No car. The neighbors were out. Assuming the worst, my dad, uncle, and I ventured into their side with flashlights. Each corner was cast into stark relief as the beams swept across the first floor. Everything seemed untouched. But then came the sound, above us, a faint, deliberate creak of floorboards. "Stay here," my dad whispered. The words were meant to reassure me, but they didn't. My heart thundered as they ascended the stairs. The silence stretched unbearably thin, snapping with an eruption of noise. Thuds, cracks, and shouts came from above. I froze. Then my uncle's scream ripped through the walls. Moments later, they descended in a panic, my uncle clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his shirt. "Lock the door," my dad barked. We retreated to our side, slamming the connecting door shut, the lock barely holding steady. The banging started moments later. Each impact sent splinters flying. A guttural growl, filled with rage, accompanied every strike. My dad and uncle armed themselves with knives, ready for the worst. The assault stopped abruptly, followed by the sound of retreating footsteps. From the window, we saw him. A wiry figure in a tattered coat, his face pale and wild, glancing back at us with a twisted grin before disappearing into the night in a black Honda Civic. We thought that was the end of it, but a year later, I spotted him again, this time as a guest at a Christmas party hosted by those very neighbors. My stomach sank. They knew. My dad said grimly. We moved out within weeks. To this day, the sound of a rattling doorknob makes my blood run cold. Terrified yet? Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Because in the world of fear, the shadows always have more stories to tell. Stay tuned for more spine-chilling horrors if you dare. Story 2. The Thief Who Claimed to be Santa. It was late Christmas Eve, technically Christmas morning, when my 5-year-old curiosity got the better of me. I crept down the stairs in the soft glow of the tree's lights, eager to see the presents. And there they were, stacked neatly beneath the branches, promises of joy waiting to be unwrapped. But then I noticed movement in the kitchen. A tall man loomed by the open fridge, gulping milk straight from the carton. "Santa?" I asked hesitantly. He turned, his face shadowed, but his eyes gleaming with something that wasn't kindness. He raised a finger to his lips, a silent command to stay quiet. "Yes," he whispered, voice deep and raspy. "I'm Santa." I didn't question why Santa wasn't wearing red or why he smelled like sweat and cigarettes. When you're 5, magic doesn't need explanation. He walked to the tree, his gaze scanning the gifts hungrily. "These are big. I'll swap them out for even better ones," he murmured, grabbing the largest boxes. He vanished into the cold night, only to return moments later for more. When he patted my head and told me not to tell my parents, I nodded dutifully, my young heart trusting his promise. But as the minutes stretched into an eternity, I realized something was wrong. I woke my parents. Their panic was instant and overwhelming. My mom screamed tore through the night when she saw the half-empty tree and the back door ajar. "What did he look like?" my dad demanded. I stammered out the only detail I could. He was tall. That was 15 years ago. The memory should have faded, but every Christmas, I can still hear his raspy voice, see the glint of his eyes in the dark. Story 3. The Mall Santa's Dark Intentions. When I was 6, my fear of mall Santas wasn't irrational. It was survival instinct. My mom insisted I sit on the lap of the bearded stranger perched beneath the glittering tree. He was alone, no elves, no helpers. "What do you want for Christmas?" he asked, his voice oily, the grip on my chest too firm. "A Game Boy," I muttered. His chuckle was low and unsettling. He leaned close, his breath warm and sour against my ear. "Come with me, and I'll give you one now." Excitement replaced fear. He led me down a quiet corridor, away from the noise of the mall. But halfway, he stopped, suggesting we use the restroom first. Inside, the door locked with an ominous click. "Where's the Game Boy?" I asked, suddenly unsure. Before he could answer, frantic pounding rattled the door. "Open up!" a man's voice roared. The Santa flinched, yanked the door open, and bolted past the stranger who had saved me. My mom was frantic when she returned, and the man who intervened told her what had almost happened. Mall security later confirmed the truth. They hadn't hired a Santa that day. The thought still haunts me. What would have happened if that man hadn't knocked?